we're back so soon. I had a blast making the original game log, and I really wanted to do it again. But trying to tackle a whole year's worth of games made me really late in getting the video out when it was relevant. So for this year, I decided to cut the game log into thirds. This video, I'll be talking about the first third of the year, the games I had beat from January to April. You know, while it's still relevant. Another change from the previous video. I'm gonna be more loose with spoilers. What do I mean by this? Essentially, minor spoilers can and will be discussed since I have a bit more of a memory of the games, and out of context scenes will be shown. Like last time, the timestamps for each game are in the description, so if you don't want to be spoiled at all, then skip the section. The video will be here when you beat the game for yourself. Without further ado, the first game I beat this year was... Wait, it wasn't Final Fantasy XV? Well, this is awkward. When the Nintendo 64 Switch Online service was revealed, I was ecstatic to see the original Paper Mario among the titles that were planned for release. I got even more excited when the game was announced as the first one to be added after the service went live. Once the game dropped, I immediately got to playing it. Having only ever watched a Let's Play of this game a long time ago, I'm glad I was able to jump in and experience it for myself. The end result was me having a lot of fun, a lot more than I expected, honestly. It's definitely one of those cult classics and has one of the greatest Mario stories ever. The dialogue is well written and the characters are memorable, especially the party members. I'm really glad I got the opportunity to play it fully. The next game I beat was Final Fantasy XV. This game. Final Fantasy was a franchise I had heard so much about in passing, but I never got around to giving the series a shot. While I hadn't heard much of any of the Final Fantasy games, except for 7, I decided that my first game would be 15. I played this game through the majority of December and January, and it was an experience to say the least. It's a pretty game, and even though some aspects of the world clash, it doesn't do so in a negative way. The main party of 4, Noctis, Gladiolus, Prompto, and Ignis, have some of the best interactions and banter I've seen. This game definitely made me realize that I love those little inter-party interactions that can happen, as they build characterization outside of the main story, and really make the party dynamics that much more believable. The music, done by Yoko Shimomura, is absolutely astonishing as well, and while most tracks aren't memorable per se, they do sound incredible and fit the game really well. Before I get to story and potential spoiler talk, let's cover the 3 DLC episodes I played, in the order I played them. The first DLC I played was episode Gladiolus. This divided the story talked about Gladiolus' time away from the party, gaining the proof that he had what it took to protect the new king of the realm. While the experience itself was pretty simplistic, the DLC was good fun. After playing as Noctis for a decent while, something as conceptually simple as changing the player character made this experience feel super fresh. Gladiolus plays just like you'd expect. He's beefy, has a giant sword, and really hits enemies hard. It's definitely the most tame of the DLC adventures, but episode Gladiolus is a fun time. The next episode was Prompto's. And man, I already liked his character in the base game, but this adventure elevates him to new heights. The story in this DLC is something else entirely, and everything that is revealed about Prompto, it's hard not to root for the guy. It helps that Prompto's FPS control style somehow doesn't make me absolutely despise his DLC. I'm usually pretty bad at first-person shooter games, but I found this control scheme to be easy to use and not that punishing for inaccuracy. In fact, his stealthing around is quite fun. Prompto has a more serious story than Gladiolus, but everything is delivered well for what ended up being the same amount of playtime as Gladiolus' adventure. Color me surprised indeed, and I ended up with slightly higher expectations going into this last DLC episode. And those expectations got blown out of the water. Holy crap, this DLC! If there's any part of this game that I will endlessly sing the praises of, it's episode Ignis. First of all, Ignis controls like a dream. His daggers burst off of 3 different elements, and each element is a different playstyle. Since he's a party tactician, it makes sense that he has the options for any scenario he finds himself in. Not to mention all of Ignis' tactics feel useful. And he also has a counter? And a hookshot? Okay. The story and the music are also out of this world. This may be my Xenoblade bias coming into play, but Mitsuda helped with the soundtrack for this DLC, and man does it show. Ignis' story spews emotion, answers questions, and just wows at every turn. It even made me cry at the end of it all. And not many games can do that to me, let alone a DLC story. For the few hours I took to play it, Ignis definitely takes the cake for best DLC. The main package of 15, that being the main story, is alright. It's pretty lackadaisical for the first hours of the game, which works as you get to know the main party of 4. Once chapter 9 is hit, however, the game takes a hard left turn in tone, and stays that way until the end. The second half of this story is really well done. The darker tone makes everything really bittersweet, however, if you've completed the DLC. Having been in every character's head, knowing what they think of the situation at hand, and their thoughts on Noctis, really sold me on the main party and their motivations. The one thing that threw me here is Noctis himself. Throughout most of the game, he's honestly a bit insufferable. Some of it can be written off in different ways, but he was my least favorite character in the main party for a good while. However, Noctis at the end of the game? Oh man. I'm not sure what exactly happened in the Crystal's Easy Bake Oven, but Noctis post-Crystal Dive was an incredible character for me. The entire time I was running around Insomnia, and especially the final battle, was super well done, and again got me emotional once the credits hit. The multiple boss fights, the final lines, and especially...
Off my chair, Jester. The king sits there.
Now, I know there are better Final Fantasy games out there. I'm looking squarely at you, Final Fantasy VII Remake. But for my first foray into the series, I find myself glad I started with 15. I really am. Through its ups and downs, it presented itself and its story well, and I'm leaving the whole experience satisfied. Phew, that was a lot. Let's lighten the mood a bit with WarioWare Get It Together. This game's story mode was something I played whenever my friend reminded me to play it, and eventually he told me enough to where I beat the game. It was a fun time. The story is simplistic, but incredibly quirky, and every character is certainly unique, although the fun scale is definitely subjective for some of them. My favorites to play were probably Cricket and Mike, but any of the characters with freedom of movement, and even some that didn't have that, were fun to play. The microgames present were simple and pretty addicting. Even when I was gathering footage, I got distracted and ended up playing almost 50 rounds of my own time. I haven't been able to truly explore this game, mainly due to a lack of IRL friends, so hopefully I'll be able to play this game's multiplayer sooner than later. Anyway, while I was still emotionally recovering from Final Fantasy, I was also replaying an all-time favorite game of mine, as my first Fire Emblem game was due for a replay. Fire Emblem Awakening introduced me to the world of fantasy swords, and for the later game's waifus, but I always loved the cast that was presented here. This time, I decided to challenge myself, and play both on hard mode and on classic. This may not seem like a challenge to some, but I've always played Fire Emblem games on the normal mode, and at least on casual. And even though I used the, oh no, someone died, reset approach to my play, I had a fun time. The earlier chapters were especially rough, but I ended up getting through it all. Even though the game is now a decade old, it's a great time that I'll gladly come back to. Just don't acknowledge that I had 2 other Fire Emblem games on the backlog this time. And I would continue to ignore these Fire Emblem games, as it was finally time to continue another journey. Ace Attorney 4, otherwise just called Apollo Justice, seems to be the black sheep of the Ace Attorney series. I see fans who swear by this game, and I see others absolutely taking the piss out of it. So, it's time for my 2 cents. And yeah, I'm a huge fan. It's definitely in my upper half of Ace Attorney games, that's for certain. Apollo is a fun new attorney to walk alongside. All of the cases are compelling and interesting, and both old and new characters really get a chance to shine in this new game. The overarching plot is also one of the more well done ones in my opinion. Fun fact, this game contains my favorite non-final case in the series, which is probably a bit controversial, but sue me, I loved Case 3. Not to mention that this game also introduces my favorite female Ace Attorney character, Trucy. Her and Apollo's relationship is one of my favorite dynamics. I mean, come on! Who doesn't love this magician and her— Alright, let's move on. Time for another game that I can't really talk about. Imposter Factory, the 3rd game in the Freebird series, was such an incredible experience. The twists and turns were well executed, and the environment of the game is incredible. If you've played the other two Freebird titles, you don't have much of a reason not to play this one. That is, unless you got emotionally destroyed by the previous two. Then maybe exercise some caution. Imposter Factory didn't hit me as hard as the others, but people with different experiences and backgrounds from me will obviously have different outlooks on the game in the end. Imposter Factory has a pretty wild story in many ways and aspects, so just be prepared for that. But in the end, like all the other Freebird games, I can highly recommend this one. Now, this was the Pokemon game I was looking for. What is essentially Breath of the Wild Pokemon? Legends Arceus was a blast to play through. This is the first time that the wild Pokemon actually felt like a threat, like they lived up to the Pokedex entries, instead of just being cute little creatures I could find in some random grass. Combine this with a more mature story, and you have a great Pokemon game for the new generation. In fact, since seeking all Pokemon is an end goal in this game, I went out of my way to not only complete the Pokédex so I can access that final fight, but I made my first and only living dex. This game was essentially everything that I wanted in a Pokemon game as a teenager. The darker story, the more mature tone, and the higher stakes. In the hands of the writers of Pokemon, it came out really well done. It also helped that my favorite Pokemon's one of the starters. I literally didn't worry about having a solid team till the end game. That's how attached I was to this guy. And yes, your eyes don't deceive. That's a shiny Yanmega. With Generation 9 revealed to follow this open world design, while I remained cautious, I was optimistic for Pokemon's future. With me playing through Legends, I decided to clean up some Legends of my own past. Time for a duo completed save files from years ago, starting with Fire Emblem Echoes. This was a game I got and enjoyed years ago, but I ended up dropping it along the way, probably due to Celica's route being a bit of a drag at times gameplay-wise. This time around, I got the willpower to finish the game fully. Although I did end up figuring out why Celica's route felt like such a slog. It turns out I had missed the two best units of that route. Whoops. Regardless of my blunder, I ended up really enjoying this journey. I do feel like I need to replay it at some point though. Since I played both halves of the story so far apart from each other, the whole experience feels a bit disjointed for me. However, the game was still really fun, and a nice change of pace from the Fire Emblem games I'm used to. After conquering one story, it was time for another. One story that I'm surprised I didn't beat sooner, as it's from my favorite period of these games. It was time for me to dive back into the world of Unova. Pokémon Black 2 was the one Pokémon game I kept playing, resetting old saves, and then getting just a bit farther with each restarted save. This time, however, I broke that streak and ended up not resetting my 6-year-old file and actually completing the game. How do I know that my file was almost half a decade old? Well, my character wasn't named after me, and it was a guy. I started using girl characters, and subsequently my name, when I got Omega Ruby. Either way, the second half of Black 2 was a really fun ride. I felt like I built a really good team, and all 6 of my Pokemon pulled their weight. At least, once I replaced our Manatan for Weavile. Sorry, bud. That's what happens when the champion is a team full of dragons. The second half of the game had a great story, and I'm glad to say I finally beat it. Black and White 2 definitely add to the reasons why Generation 5 stands on top for me. After clearing this duo of games, it was time for another dive into Ace Attorney. Man, I cleared a lot of DS games this go around, didn't I? Anyway, Dual Destinies was an all-over-the-place game for me, to say the least. Phoenix is back in the saddle, Athena's a new attorney, and Apollo is going through his edgy phase? After sitting on this game for a while, Dual Destinies has a few flaws with me. And one of them is Athena. No, she's not a bad character. No, she doesn't have a bad story. In fact, I loved her story and character arc. She just felt overshadowed. Dual Destinies has 3 attorneys as opposed to the 1 in the previous game, and I think this aspect really hurts Athena as a character. Instead of being a main focus for what feels like should be her game, she gets a singular case as the lead attorney, 2 cases as the assistant, and then has a much bigger role in that final case. I personally think that this could have been done way better, and most of the solutions I think of boil down to not having 3 playable attorneys. Athena could still be an attorney, and maybe Phoenix is relegated to more of a mentor role, or he only comes in for that final case. Or just have Athena be the assistant, and have her help either Apollo or Phoenix with her mood matrix. It's just a shame that her character feels so strong, but gets shafted in her debut game when she's supposed to be one of, if not the main focus. Okay, I'll stop criticizing this game so much and bring up my positive points. The starting case of the game is tense as all hell, and is definitely one of the more well-executed starts to an Ace Attorney game, even if it's confusing at first. All of the cases have a great intertwined story, even if it's, again, a tad confusing to wrap one's head around. The OST still slaps, and the upgrade from DS audio to 3DS audio really shows with these games. The main villain, while I will not spoil their identity, is downright terrifying. Easily the scariest Ace Attorney big bad by far. They're really well executed, and their introduction is memorable to say the least. Either way, I'm excited to see what the rest of the series has in store for me. In justice we trust! And now, we arrive at the final game of the first 4 months. The last game I beat is one I got for Christmas. Wait, I actually beat a game I got for Christmas this year? Holy f- Tales games were something I was aware of, but never knew where to start. It turns out, you can start almost anywhere. Against the wishes of my Tales of the Abyss loving friends, I decided to play the latest entry, Tales of Arise. I mean, once one of them described the game as a combination of Xenoblade and Marvel's Spider-Man, how could I not? At the end of the day, it definitely has a couple flaws. The story takes a hard left turn at one point, and delivers information insanely quickly, which makes the pacing also follow that hard left turn. However, the combat is smooth, fast, and hella fun. All of the party members feel viable, hit hard, and it's usually not a problem to swap between them mid-combat. The characters are lovable, and any hateable characters either die off, or they show legit growth and come into new light by the end of the story. Move over Final Fantasy XV, because the party dynamics these 6 have are probably some of my favorites, especially the skits. Oh boy, the skits are hilarious. From Sirius talks about the trials ahead.
Once we get to the mountain, the terrain won't be easy. We should rest up here before pressing on.
But what about Shion? She's waiting for us.
All the more reason to conserve our energy.
To just the most random shit.
Not that owls are any better.
Hmm?
Ah, ow! Ow! I take it back! I love owls! Owls are the best! I swear!
They're incredibly well written and bring together both new information and genuine interactions. Overall, again, this is a great first Tales game to play, as the comforts of modern day games, as well as a great story and amazing cast of characters. I'm excited to dive back into this Tales world. At some point. Soon. Hopefully? That's all for the first third of the year. Finishing up April, I knew I had some things to look forward to the next months, including a long-awaited trip on the horizon. I'm super excited to show you guys what other games the year had in store for me. So, I'll see you, hopefully soon.